Kia ora everyone and welcome back to Civilization. Today I want to talk about my Civ 7 wishlist, and this list could be really long, so I'm going to try and keep it concise to the point. I'm going to overlay my 6 sort of top features or gameplay changes that I'd like to see. So let's crack straight into it. First up, and for me this is a big one, and it's changes to terrain and the map itself, okay? There are 2 big things that I think that the Civ franchise has missed for a very long time. Firstly, traversable rivers, okay? Rivers in Civ have become more important, particularly in Civilization 6 with the addition of fresh water and needing to plan city growth around having access to fresh water. But there's still such a missed opportunity, and here's why. I think that rivers could easily take up half a tile, potentially a whole tile in terms of their width, and still span the same length of 7 or 8 tiles through the map. That would allow you to actually navigate through rivers appropriately as we have in the real world. Now, not every river should be this size, but there should definitely be some rivers on the map that can be traversed by naval units, that can have cargo ships sent up and down them, right? It just makes sense. If you think about the real world, we absolutely have rivers that are really responsible for a lot of trade. A lot of commercial activity, and movement of people, right? And likewise, movement of troops. So I really think we need rivers that are open and traversable for trade, for units, for military action, for anything. The other thing that I'd like to see in terms of the terrain, and this is more about the map and the climate, is temperature differences, okay? I want to see a snowy tundra area of the map be actually cold in-game, and then I want to see that have impacts on how my civilization grows and behaves, okay? So, for example, a civilization that settles in the cold may spawn with a bonus to tundra tiles, okay? So if you found your first city in the tundra or within, say, 3 tiles of tundra, then for the rest of the game, your civ has a bonus where tundra tiles provide an additional half food because your civilization has adapted to the terrain around you. And temperature control is a great measure for that because it's a really easy one to overlay, right? You make the equator region hot with more deserts, you make the poles colder with more tundra, rainforest potentially cooler than open plains, so on and so forth. It would be quite easy to implement and understand, and it could have a really significant difference on how civilizations adapt and behave to their environment, and that would help make each game and each playthrough just that little bit more unique. It wouldn't have to be a massive big feature that would shape your entire game, like say building Petra in a desert city, but this is something that we could use to make each game a little bit more interesting. Next up, I'd like to see the expansion of Civ 6 Leaders system. I think the Leaders system is really good and really useful, but some of the leaders can be a little bit overcomplicated. It can be a lot for players to remember and manage. You might find yourself looking up to figure out what does this leader do, what does that leader do, and if we scale the Leaders system inappropriately, it could make that confusion and that bloating even worse. What I would like to see is a slimmed down number of civilizations launching with the game, and each one to have 3 leaders. You might think, what? There couldn't possibly be 3 leaders for Civ X or Civ Y, but there could, okay? There absolutely could. Almost every civilization in human existence has had at least 3 people who have led it in some way, and had a meaningful impact on that civilization's history and progress, right? I think it's totally doable. I'd like to see each leader have a relatively simple ability, but one that makes a difference to the ultimate victory condition of the Civ. For example, if we take Russia, we could have Peter focused on westernization and culture and growing cultural cities similar to the West. We could have Catherine, on the other hand, hold a military stick, for example. There are lots of different options. We could then even have a modern leader for Russia, and they could be scientific in nature, okay? We could take someone from the Soviet times, for example. There are lots of things we could do with this system, and I think that 3 leaders per civ with relatively simple abilities tailored towards different victory conditions would be a wonderful way to implement it in Civilization 7. The next change I'd like to see is around graphics and art style. I make no secret that when Civ 6 first launched, it was not my game, and the graphics were a big reason for that. Now, It's different now, don't get me wrong, I've adjusted, and I actually quite like it. I quite like the graphics style. I like both Civ 5 and Civ 6 now for very different reasons. And for that reason, I'd like to see Civ 7 give us a little bit more flexibility in terms of graphics. We often see games launch with multiple texture packs these days, or at least implement texture packs down the line. And I think that Civ could do that. We could have a realistic, right? We'll call it the realism texture pack. It'll be much more akin to Civilization 5, a little bit grittier, a little bit more realistic, a little bit less flashy. And then we could have the more modern, cartoony style of Civilization 6, which perhaps appeals to a more modern consumer and is perhaps more palatable on different platforms, i.e. mobile or Nintendo Switch. So I think that, really, give me both. Give me 2 options. Heck, give me 3 options. Why not? Seems relatively easy to do. It wouldn't have to be at launch of the game. It could come throughout. And of course the community can step in and mod this as well, I realize. But it would be nice to have some official support there too. Next up, improvement number 4 is more of a functional improvement rather than a visual one. Multiplayer. Civ multiplayer just doesn't really work, and it has been plagued with errors of desyncing throughout time. Civ 6 is better than Civ 5's in some ways, for sure, and the addition to sort of share the game with your friend on a platform like Steam is really nice as well. But really, we just need some better multiplayer infrastructure. We need to be able to host games that don't desync, and it's something that would mean a lot to me because I'd love to be playing games with subscribers, but it's just too difficult at the moment to actually make it work without spending hours and hours and hours over it. So give me an improved multiplayer system. Give me some dedicated servers as well, please, come on. It's the least you could do. And it would be fantastic because it would allow all of the community to play together in a much more meaningful way. Next up, I'd really like to see some stimulus into the late game. I want a stimulus check fired into the late game and money sprayed everywhere, okay? I want better global diplomacy. I think that's a big one. It's a big one. As we move toward the late game, we start to think more about diplomatic actions. Not necessarily diplomatic victory, but actions, right? Sanctions, for example, don't really exist. You just ban a civ from trading and that's it. What about economic levers, where it costs slightly more to trade with them or costs slightly less? Or, you know, there's all sorts of different yields that we could influence through global diplomacy that we're currently not really touching on. There's also opportunity for fragmentation within a global diplomatic system. So in a game where there's lots of civs, there could be a UN Security Council type organization that operates above the standard global diplomacy. You know, there could be tiers of global diplomatic means and infrastructure. So you could have a UN Security Council at the top with just the top sort of 5 most powerful civs in the game, and then the whole body, the Senate floor, and then perhaps even more below that. There are lots of options, but not just with diplomacy. I think there's many ways to stimulate interest into the late game. We could see even the inclusion of a few significant dynamic events. Now, we don't need thousands and thousands like Old World or Crusader Kings, but just a few significant dynamic events that play out perhaps as eras move in and out could be really interesting. And I'd like to see more of that, and also more building on Civ's emergency system, where whether it was religious emergency or a war emergency, I'd like to see some more improvement there. Finally, I'd like some changes to the culture system. I'm broadly happy with science and the way it works. I think we could see some balancing a bit more with it, but broadly I like the tech tree, I like the scientific system. I don't so much enjoy either of the cultural systems in Civ 5 and 6. They're fine, don't get me wrong, but I would like to see more of a civics tree. A similar kind of tree that we see in Humankind, that sort of RPG-style tree, where we can see the whole tree in a screen, and you can see different directions, right? This branch of the tree is about laws. This branch of the tree links with the economy. I'd like that just to be overlaid in quite a really simple, straightforward way. And likewise, I'd like the policies that you would get from it to be described really clearly. Civilization 6's policy card system is a little bit bloated, and I think we could really write it in plain English and just have it really upfront and clear. Here's a civics tree. This is what each part of it does. Let's revamp it and make it really clear. One other less functional but more sort of gameplay-oriented change that I thought could be quite interesting would be to link a cultural victory to an economic victory. They wouldn't have to always be the same, but if we think about in the real world, in real life, if there's a dominant culture, that culture tends to generate economic activity as well. Not necessarily saying that it's selling itself, but if you think about the blue jeans example from Civilization 5, right? Your people are buying our blue jeans or whatever it is. that actually happens in the real world as well. If a culture becomes significant, and we think about all the significant branches that have come out of the American culture, whether it be the consumer culture or the historical one, they do generate economic activity, right? Through tourism, which generates economic activity, of course, and we've already seen that, but other means as well. There are hugely significant impacts on business and trade that I think at the moment go a little bit untouched in the cultural system, and it would be nice to see them linked through. Thank you very much for watching my Civilization 7 wish list of sorts. Do let me know down below if you have anything that I haven't talked about today. I'd love to hear more from you, and please leave a like rating if you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.